My name is Emma Johnson, 25 years old, the invisible maid of the Hayes estate. I never imagined that 7 years of loyal service to that family would end in such a bitter tragedy. All that time, I quietly listened, took notes, and told myself I was nothing more than a shadow in their world of wealth and rotting secrets. But the truth is, my silence had already made me a pawn in their game. My youth, my pride, my entire life was traded away, only to lead me into a flawless trap. Victor lying dead in his own blood, Edward shoving the testimony into my hands. Sophie smirked with contempt, Thomas's eyes turned to ice, and Margaret trembled in her feigned fragility. Each one played their part, together weaving a performance designed to frame me as the murderer. But the cruelest twist of all is this: I was never a witness, I was the prey. What they don't know is that I've been preparing for this moment all along. And this time, the stage is mine. They will pay. I remember the first day I truly understood how twisted things could be in the Hayes household. I had been working as a young housekeeper for a few months, organizing silverware, folding linens, and keeping track of endless schedules. I thought my life was simple: just clean the mansion, serve tea, and stay invisible. But that evening changed everything. I was walking down the main hall when I heard shouting from the living room. The voice belonged to Victor, the oldest son, always full of anger and ambition. "You think you can control everything, Thomas? Everything your father left behind?" His words were sharp, cutting through the quiet. From the corner, I saw Thomas Hayes, the patriarch, tall and imposing with a gaze that could freeze anyone in place. "Victor, listen to me. You are missing the bigger picture. I built this family to survive, not to crumble under your foolish plans," he said evenly, but there was fire in his eyes. I froze, unsure if I should retreat or risk stepping closer. Every step echoed on the polished floor. The confrontation was more than an argument. It was a battle of power, pride, and secrets too dark to imagine. Margaret Hayes, the mother, appeared at the doorway, her presence commanding, like she owned the air itself. "Enough, both of you. You are tearing this family apart. Do you want everyone to know the truth? Do you want everything we built to collapse?" she demanded. Her eyes darted at me for a fraction of a second, almost like she was testing whether I could hear her or if I should vanish into the walls. I kept my distance, gripping the edge of the hallway railing. Claire, the youngest sibling, was sitting on the couch, wringing her hands nervously. Her eyes were wide, almost pleading, as if she could melt into the floor. "Victor, maybe we should." "Just wait," she said quietly, but her voice was swallowed by the tension. Edward, the family lawyer, a man with sharp suits and sharper eyes, stood to the side. "We all need to calm down," he said, but his tone was more of a warning than advice. He glanced at me and nodded slightly. I didn't understand then, but I later realized he was always watching, cataloging, storing every detail for the right moment. I learned early that secrets in the Hayes family were like spiders' webs. Delicate, sticky, dangerous. Each member had a role, a mask, and a motive, and that night the cracks between them showed everything. Victor shouted again, "I deserve more than this. You promised me everything would be mine if I followed the rules. Now I see you never intended to keep your word." His hand slammed the arm of the couch, and I flinched at the sound. Thomas stepped forward, his voice low but forceful. "You will never understand until you see the full scope of responsibility. It is not about greed, it is about survival and legacy." His eyes flicked toward Margaret and then to me, almost like he could sense my presence without turning. Margaret's voice cut in again, sharper than before. "You are being selfish, Victor. I will not let your impulsiveness ruin everything. I've held this family together for years, and I will continue to do so, even if it means making hard decisions you'll never forgive." I wanted to leave, to escape the tension that was suffocating, but something in me told me to stay. These weren't just arguments about money or power. They were revealing layers of darkness, lies, and betrayal I had never imagined. Every word felt like a piece of a puzzle I had been unknowingly part of since I stepped into this house. Suddenly, a vase fell from the table as Victor's frustration spilled over. Margaret's sharp reaction was instant, grabbing it before it shattered. "Watch it," she hissed, glaring at him, but her hands trembled slightly. I could see fear behind her control, the kind that only comes when someone is desperate to keep a secret. Claire's voice broke through quietly, "Please, can we all just stop, please? It's too much." But it was too late. The tension hung in the air like smoke, and I realized that whatever happened tonight would change everything. Edward finally stepped closer to Victor, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You need to listen, all of you. No one leaves this room until we find a solution. This is bigger than you think." His calm authority did soothe anyone. It only emphasized the seriousness of what was at stake. I slowly moved to the side, leaning against the wall. I knew then that my job was no longer just keeping the house clean. I was now a witness to a battle that involved wealth, power, and secrets older than anyone in the room, and I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. That night, I went to my small quarters above the garage, hands shaking as I poured a cup of tea. My mind raced, replaying every word, every glance, every subtle threat. I realized with a sinking feeling that the Hayes family's wealth and power were built on something dark, something that no one outside this house could ever understand. And I had just stepped into it, whether I liked it or not. I told myself I would stay quiet, blend into the background, do my job, but a small voice inside whispered that I would be drawn in further, that I would see things no one else should see, that I would be forced to decide between survival and truth. I fell asleep with the image of Victor's anger, Thomas's calculated stare, Margaret's trembling hands, and Claire's frightened eyes burned into my mind. I had no idea then that in a few days my life would be turned upside down, my innocence challenged, and my courage tested like never before. But that night was the first step, the moment when I knew the Hayes family was far more dangerous than anyone could imagine, and I was now part of their world. I couldn't sleep that night. The echoes of their voices haunted me, the sharpness of Victor's anger, the cold calm of Thomas, Margaret's trembling control. I paced my small quarters above the garage, replaying every word, every gesture. Something about this family didn't sit right, and I knew I was staring at secrets much deeper than arguments over inheritance. The next morning, I decided to do what I had avoided before: observe. Watch every member of the family closely, take note of what they said, how they moved, who they trusted, and most importantly, who they feared. The Hayes household was a chessboard, and I was just beginning to see the pieces. I started with Claire. She was quiet, her hands often fidgeting with her necklace, eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape route. I approached her while she watered the garden roses. "Morning, Claire," I said lightly, trying not to alarm her. She looked up startled, then forced a small smile. "Emma," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Did you hear them last night?" I nodded, pretending calm. "Yes, but I try not to get involved. It's not my place." Her gaze lingered on me. "It's not just arguments. There are things you don't understand, things even I can't explain." I wanted to press further, but she shook her head and walked away. I realized that even the timid ones in this house carried pieces of the puzzle I would need later. Later that day, I was in the kitchen organizing the silverware when Thomas entered, his presence commanding as always. "Emma," he said, leaning against the counter, "you've been around here long enough to notice patterns, haven't you?" I froze slightly. "Patterns?" I nodded carefully. I guess so, Mr. Hayes, I just observe, that's all." He chuckled, a low, controlled sound. "Observation is dangerous in this house. You see too much, you risk getting pulled into things you never wanted. But it seems you already have a knack for noticing the right things." His words made me uneasy. I nodded again, unsure whether to feel proud or terrified. Margaret appeared then, her silk blouse crisp, her expression sharp. "Thomas, if you're going to lecture our housekeeper, could you at least keep it brief?" she snapped, though her eyes flickered toward me in a way that suggested curiosity rather than anger. Thomas smirked slightly. "Just sharing wisdom, Margaret. Emma will need it sooner than she thinks." I felt a chill. Was he warning me or teasing me? I didn't know, and in the Hayes household, guessing wrong could have consequences. Over the next few days, I began noticing strange behavior. Victor was sneaking into the study late at night, papers clutched tightly, glances over his shoulder. Claire often lingered in hallways listening, muttering to herself. Margaret was on the phone constantly, her conversations cryptic, and Edward, the lawyer, always hovering, taking notes that no one else seemed to notice. One afternoon, while dusting the grand library, I found a hidden compartment in a bookshelf. Inside was an old leather-bound journal with a faded emblem on the cover. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was elegant but sharp, a record of transactions, correspondences, and accounts dating back hundreds of years. Some entries mentioned money obtained under questionable circumstances, land deals, and business maneuvers that were not legal by today's standards. A note at the end of one entry caught my eye. "This family's fortune is built on shadows. Protect it at all costs." I shivered. I had suspected something, but this confirmed it. The wealth, the power, the tension, it was all underpinned by acts no one could talk about openly. That night, I overheard another argument, this one louder than the last. Victor's voice echoed down the hall. "I won't stay silent. I've found proof that everything you promised me is fake." Thomas's reply was calm but deadly. "Do not underestimate the weight of what you are threatening. You don't know what you are playing with, Victor." Margaret's sharp voice cut in. "Victor, you will regret opening doors that should stay closed." And then the sound of breaking glass, a scream, and I ran toward the source. But it was just a minor accident, a vase knocked over, but the tension remained thick. I realized these confrontations weren't just conflicts, they were rehearsals, a prelude to something bigger, more dangerous. I began keeping a private notebook, recording who said what, noting their moods, and sketching relationships I barely understood. Every glance, every sigh, every hesitation felt like a clue. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew it would lead me somewhere significant. Edward approached me one evening, leaning casually against the doorway. "Emma, I see you taking notes. Be careful. Some things aren't meant to be discovered, but perhaps you are more curious than most." I met his gaze. "I just want to understand, Mr. Edward. I'm not looking to interfere." He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Curiosity is a double-edged sword. Keep it sharp and it might save you. Let it slip and it could destroy you." Those words lingered in my mind. I realized that in the Hayes household, nothing was as simple as it seemed. Every person carried secrets, motives, and fears, and I was beginning to see that my own role was changing. I was no longer just an observer. I was becoming a participant, whether I liked it or not. I spent hours poring over the journal, cross-referencing dates with conversations I had overheard, noting inconsistencies. Victor's anger, Margaret's secrecy, Thomas's cold logic, they all started to form patterns. But I knew the true test would come when I confronted the reality of what had been hidden from me for so long. By the end of the week, I realized the Hayes family's empire was not just about wealth. It was a house of mirrors, reflecting deceit, ambition, and survival. And I, a young housekeeper, had just stepped into a world where every step could mean life or ruin. I couldn't yet imagine that very soon, my life would be turned upside down completely. That very soon, I would be accused of a crime I did not commit, forced to run, and pushed to uncover truths that would shake the foundation of everything I thought I knew. But that night, as I closed the journal and blew out my candle, I knew one thing: I was no longer invisible. I was a witness, and in this house, witnesses always mattered. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The journal lay open on my desk, its pages filled with centuries of secrets, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The mansion was silent, but in the Hayes house, silence was never innocent. I decided to stay up a little longer to see if I could catch anything unusual. From my small window, I saw the faint light of the study flicker. Victor was there, hunched over papers, muttering under his breath. I couldn't hear his words clearly, but the intensity in his posture told me he was planning something serious. Suddenly, the door creaked and Claire stepped into the hallway, her eyes wide. She froze when she saw me. "Emma, what are you doing awake?" she whispered. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "But I guess we're both curious about things we shouldn't be." She nodded slowly, glancing back toward the study. "Victor, he's dangerous when he's like this. He's not just angry, he's, I don't know, obsessed." "Obsessed with what?" I asked, stepping closer. She hesitated. "He thinks there's a way to take control of everything. He's found clues, things that even Thomas and Margaret don't realize he knows, and I'm afraid he'll go too far." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was a power struggle, and I was trapped in the middle. The next morning, I watched the breakfast scene unfold. Thomas, Margaret, Victor, Claire, Edward, and Sophie, the family friend, sat around the long dining table. Victor slammed his fork down mid-bite. "You think I'll sit quietly while you steal what's mine?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Victor, don't test my patience. You've already overstepped." Thomas leaned back in his chair, calm but intimidating. "Victor, your actions have consequences. Everything you do is under scrutiny, and some doors once opened can never be closed." Edward's voice was measured. "I recommend we all take a moment to reflect. Escalating this will benefit no one." Sophie, ever the enigma, smirked slightly. "Some of us thrive on chaos, don't we, Emma?" She looked at me as if daring me to answer. I kept my mouth shut, unsure whether to be honest or to disappear into the floor. After breakfast, I returned to the library. I couldn't stop thinking about the journal and Victor's obsessive behavior. I noticed something unusual in one of the older entries, references to a hidden ledger that documented transactions, inheritances, and favors that had been swept under the rug for generations. If Victor had found it, it could explain his obsession. Later that evening, I overheard Victor and Claire arguing quietly in the hallway. "I'm doing this for the family," Victor hissed. "You don't understand the stakes." Claire's voice was trembling. "No, Victor, you don't get to decide what's right. This isn't just about money or control. People will get hurt." Victor's footsteps echoed down the hall as he stormed away. I realized then that this obsession wasn't just greed, it was dangerous, reckless, and unpredictable. Over the next few days, I followed Victor discreetly, trying to understand the depth of his plans. He visited old safes, pored over ledgers, and even sneaked into Margaret's private office. Each action hinted at secrets within secrets, and I began to fear that someone could get seriously hurt if no one intervened. One afternoon, Edward approached me in the kitchen, his expression unreadable. "Emma, you seem to be paying very close attention to Victor," he said, almost casually. "Be careful. In this house, knowledge can be as dangerous as action." "I'm just curious," I said cautiously, not wanting to reveal too much. "I'm trying to understand what's going on." Edward's eyes held mine for a long moment. "Curiosity is necessary, but it can also paint a target on your back. Remember that." That night, the tension in the house reached a boiling point. I was walking past the study when I heard Thomas's low voice, urgent and commanding. "Victor, stop. This path you're on leads to destruction." Victor's angry reply cut through the room. "I will not be ignored. Everything I've discovered will be mine, or no one's." Margaret's voice, sharp and controlled, added fuel to the fire. "You will regret this, Victor. Do not underestimate the consequences." And then, for a brief moment, silence. The kind of silence that carries dread. I stayed in the shadows, holding my breath, feeling the weight of history, power, and family secrets pressing down on me. It became clear that the Hayes family was at a tipping point. Victor's obsession could ignite a disaster, but the truth behind it was more complex than anyone suspected. The journal, the ledger, the hidden histories, all pieces of a puzzle that I was just beginning to understand. As I retreated to my quarters that night, I realized that my life was changing in ways I couldn't control. I was no longer just a housekeeper. I was a witness, an observer, and potentially a player in the dangerous games of power, greed, and revenge. And I knew that very soon, the events set in motion by Victor and the secrets of this family would drag me into a storm I could not escape. I lay in bed, notebook by my side, scribbling observations, noting patterns, trying to make sense of the chaos. I whispered to myself, "Emma, you have to be smart, you have to be careful, but you also have to understand everything before it's too late." I woke to a sound that made my stomach drop. A crash, a sharp cry that didn't belong to the usual chaos of the house. I bolted upright, heart hammering, and ran toward the noise. The hallways were dark, shadows stretching across the walls. My footsteps echoed as I ran past portraits of the Hayes ancestors, all staring down like silent witnesses. When I reached the source, the living room, my blood ran cold. Victor lay on the floor, a pool of dark liquid spreading beneath him. Claire was crouched beside him, her hands trembling, eyes wide with panic. "Oh my God, Emma, he's gone," she screamed, her voice cracking. I froze, unable to move or speak. Everything in me screamed that I had to act, but fear rooted me to the spot. Margaret appeared at the doorway, her face pale, lips pressed tightly together. "Call someone, now," she commanded, though her hands shook just slightly, betraying the control she tried to maintain. I fumbled for my phone, my hands slick with sweat. The call went through, voices on the line, asking questions, confirming Victor's condition. And then came the moment I had feared most. Edward arrived, his expression unreadable. He looked at me directly, a long, steady gaze that made my knees weaken. "Emma." "What happened?" I stammered. I don't know, I heard him and I ran." Thomas appeared behind Margaret, his face grave, eyes sharp. "Stay where you are, Emma, do not move until the police arrive." It was official. I was now a witness, and in the Hayes household that often meant being a suspect. My mind raced. I had seen Victor's obsession, overheard arguments, but I had never imagined it would end like this. The next hours were a blur of flashing lights, officers asking questions, and neighbors whispering outside the gates. Every word I said was recorded, analyzed, scrutinized. Claire sobbed quietly beside me, Margaret tried to maintain composure, and Edward took notes, silent and precise as ever. "You were the last one to see him alive," the detective said, looking directly at me. His words didn't accuse yet, but they carried suspicion, a weight that pressed down on me. I was near the hall, yes. But I didn't touch him. I didn't, I swear," I said, feeling tears prick at my eyes. The detective nodded slowly, jotting something down. "We'll see. Everyone is a potential witness and suspect. Stay available." I was left alone in the kitchen later that evening, my hands shaking as I poured tea I couldn't drink. I realized that the Hayes family was even more dangerous than I had imagined. Secrets, lies, ambitions, all intertwined, and somehow I had been pulled into the middle of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the journal, the hidden ledger, Victor's obsession. He hadn't been reckless for nothing. Something deeper was going on, something that connected the family's past to his death. I began reviewing my notes, comparing conversations, cross-checking timelines. Every detail mattered. Every look, every word could reveal the truth. I realized that while I had been cautious before, now my survival depended on understanding the full picture. Margaret called me quietly into the study later. "Emma, you have to understand," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Victor's death, it's complicated. There are forces in this house that go beyond your understanding. But you are part of it now." I looked at her, unsure whether to believe her or fear her. "I don't know what you mean," I said carefully. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "The Hayes fortune, the history, it was built on acts that were never meant to be revealed. Victor knew something. He was close to exposing it, and now everyone is looking for answers." I left the room feeling the weight of her words. This wasn't just about inheritance or anger. It was about centuries of secrets, lies, and power struggles. And somehow I was in the middle of it, accused, questioned, watched. Edward approached me later, quietly in the hallway. "Emma, you need to be careful. Everyone has an interest here, and suspicion spreads quickly. Protect yourself, but don't make any moves until you understand exactly what you're dealing with." His warning stuck with me. The Hayes household wasn't just a family, it was a battlefield, and I had been thrown into the front lines without armor. Over the next few days, the mansion felt different. Eyes watched me constantly, whispers followed me through hallways, and every conversation seemed to carry hidden meaning. Claire avoided me, Margaret remained distant, Thomas was unreadable, and Sophie's smirk hinted that she knew more than she let on. I realized I had to take matters into my own hands. Waiting for answers from anyone here would be dangerous. If I didn't find the truth, I could be trapped, blamed for a crime I didn't commit, and left with nothing. That night, I revisited the journal and the hidden ledger, piecing together clues, looking for connections I had missed before. I started to see a pattern, one that explained Victor's obsession, the arguments, and perhaps even his death. The Hayes fortune, the family's control, the hidden accounts, all of it tied back to decisions made long before I was born. I whispered to myself, "I can't let this break me. I have to understand everything and prove I'm not guilty." For the first time, fear and determination mixed in a sharp, clear focus. I realized that running wasn't an option anymore. To survive, to clear my name, I had to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. The Hayes family had secrets, yes, but I was beginning to see that knowledge could be power. And for the first time, I felt the resolve to step out of the shadows and into the chaos, to see it all through and find justice, for Victor, for myself, and for the truth buried beneath centuries of lies. I knew I couldn't wait for anyone else to act. The police had questions, the family had suspicions, and everyone's motives were tangled in ways I couldn't fully understand yet. I had to do this on my own. That night, I packed a small bag, my notebook, the journal, and the ledger, and slipped quietly out of my quarters. The house was silent, but the air was thick with tension. I moved down the hall, checking doors, listening for any signs that someone was awake or suspicious. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the thrill of taking control of my own fate for the first time. I started with the study. Victor had spent countless hours there, and I hoped to find clues he had left behind. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk, but my eyes immediately caught a folder partially hidden under a pile of correspondence. Inside were maps, old deeds, and letters that referenced properties I hadn't even known existed. Some entries hinted at a hidden location, a place tied to the origins of the Hayes fortune. I whispered to myself, so this is what Victor was obsessed with, a secret they've kept for centuries? Claire appeared suddenly in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Emma, what are you doing here? You can't be snooping through his things." "I'm not snooping. I'm trying to understand," I said quickly. Victor was close to discovering something big. If I don't figure this out, who will? Her lips pressed together as she considered my words. Finally, she nodded, though reluctantly. "Okay, but you have to be careful. You don't know who you can trust. Margaret watches everything. Thomas, he knows more than he lets on. And Sophie, she's not just a friend." I nodded, heart racing. "I know, that's why I need to do this quietly." Claire hesitated, then leaned closer. Victor left clues in the West Wing, old trunks, hidden panels. He believed there was something buried, a treasure, a ledger, proof of, well, the family's history. But he never got far. Everyone else thinks it's just junk. I felt a thrill of hope mixed with fear. The idea of finding something Victor had died trying to uncover made my pulse spike. "Show me," I whispered. Together we crept to the West Wing, a section of the house that was dusty and rarely used. The air smelled of old wood and memories. Trunks lined the walls, covered in layers of dust. I pulled on one that seemed out of place and found it locked. Using a small key Victor had kept in the ledger, I opened it carefully. Inside were stacks of letters, maps, and a small chest wrapped in a faded cloth. "This must be it," I murmured, my hands trembling as I lifted the chest. Claire's eyes widened. "Be careful. Whatever in there, it changes everything." I opened it slowly. Inside were documents, old coins, and a few sealed envelopes marked with dates from over 100 years ago. There were letters detailing shady land deals, inheritances, and hints of illegal activities that had built the Hayes fortune. But there was more, references to a location, hidden somewhere on the property, where valuables and records had been stored for safekeeping. "This is huge," I whispered. Victor was right. This could prove everything, explain his obsession, and maybe clear my name if I can show I had nothing to do with his death. Claire's eyes softened, a rare moment of vulnerability. "You're brave, Emma, more than anyone realizes, but don't underestimate them. Margaret, she would do anything to protect her secrets. And Thomas, he's colder than you think." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on me. I had discovered a treasure, yes, but it also made me a target. Every step I took from here on out would have to be careful, calculated. One wrong move and the wrong person could end up dead, or I could end up blamed. Over the next few nights, I worked quietly, cataloging what I had found, cross-referencing dates, and trying to piece together Victor's final movements. I realized that the Hayes family had built their fortune not just on wealth, but on manipulation, secrets, and shadows. The chest was only the beginning. The real prize, the real truth, was still hidden somewhere. Sophie caught me once while I was examining a set of letters. "You're digging too deep," she said casually, leaning against the doorframe. "Some things are better left alone, Emma." I looked up at her, voice steady despite the fear creeping into my chest. "I can't leave it alone. Someone's dead, secrets are being hidden, and I want to understand everything. I want to make it right." Her smirk didn't falter. "Be careful. You don't want to be the next problem in the Hayes house." As she walked away, I realized she wasn't just a family friend. She was part of the web, a player in the game I was barely beginning to understand. But I didn't have a choice. I had to continue. I spent hours tracing maps, reading letters, and connecting dots. Victor's obsession was my guide, his research a roadmap. I began seeing the outlines of a hidden vault somewhere on the estate, a place where the family's deepest secrets, and perhaps the proof of their past crimes, were stored. I whispered to myself, I will find it. I have to, not just for me, but for Victor and for the truth. The next morning, I moved cautiously through the halls, pretending to do routine chores, all while mentally planning my next steps. Every glance from Margaret, every word from Edward, every smirk from Sophie felt loaded with meaning. I was walking a tightrope, and one misstep could cost me everything. But for the first time since Victor's death, I felt a sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was hunting for answers, for justice, for the chance to set things right. And I knew that if I succeeded, it would not just clear my name, but reveal the truth buried deep in the shadows of the Hayes family. I realized quickly that I wasn't alone in my investigation. Every move I made seemed to echo in the mansion, every step shadowed by unseen eyes. Margaret's presence had grown heavier, more calculated, her glances sharp as knives. Thomas lingered in rooms longer than necessary, and Sophie's smirk appeared at odd times, always when I least expected it. One evening, while I was searching the library for additional clues, I heard a faint click behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat. Sophie leaned casually against the doorway, a glass of wine in hand. "Burning the midnight oil again, Emma? You really don't know when to quit, do you?" I swallowed hard, trying to appear calm. I was just organizing the shelves. Some books were out of place." She raised an eyebrow, eyes glittering with amusement. "Sure, that's what they all say. Just be careful. Not everyone in this house likes curiosity, and some curiosity comes with consequences." I nodded, forcing a small smile. Her warning was clear, but I refused to let it deter me. I had come too far to stop now. The following night, I decided to check the West Wing again, hoping to trace more of Victor's clues. Every step was cautious, measured, but the house seemed alive, listening. Shadows moved unnaturally in corners, doors creaked without wind, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking me. Claire appeared silently behind a stack of old trunks. "Emma, you need to slow down. If they catch you here, there's no excuse they'll believe," she whispered, fear in her voice. "I know," I replied, "but I have to find it. Victor didn't die in vain, and if I don't uncover the truth, no one will. Not even the family will admit what's buried." As we moved through the West Wing, I discovered a panel in the floor, slightly ajar. My pulse raced as I knelt and pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that rose from below smelled of dust, age, and something metallic. Claire's hand brushed mine. "This is it, Emma. This is where he was heading." I took a deep breath and descended, my flashlight revealing stone walls, old crates, and chains securing a small vault. The realization hit me: Victor's obsession was justified. This was the hidden heart of the Hayes fortune, the repository of secrets, wealth, and the proof of acts that should never have been exposed. Suddenly, a sound above the stairs made me freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. My heart raced. I grabbed a nearby trunk for cover and whispered to Claire, "Quick, hide, don't let them see us." Margaret's voice floated down faintly, sharp, and controlled. "I know you're down there, Emma. You think you can uncover what belongs to us without permission? Think again." I swallowed hard, adrenaline surging. "We can't get caught. We have to stay calm and quiet." Claire nodded, pressing herself into the shadows. Margaret's footsteps lingered, searching, circling. Every second felt eternal. I could hear her muttering, perhaps to herself or someone unseen. Finally, the footsteps receded. I exhaled slowly, shaking. "That was too close," I whispered. "We can't risk being caught again." Claire's eyes were wide, fear evident. "You're brave, Emma, but this is dangerous. The family won't stop until they control the secret." I nodded, determination replacing fear. "I know, that's why we have to move faster, smarter. Victor left enough clues for us to find the truth. We just have to follow them carefully." Over the next few nights, I returned to the vault in secret, mapping the layout, cataloging letters, coins, and artifacts, and piecing together the family's history. Each document revealed a layer of deception, manipulation, and crime. I realized the Hayes fortune had been built on betrayal and illegal actions spanning generations. Sophie caught me once again while I was working. Her approach was silent, almost predatory. "You really think you can finish this without anyone noticing? Emma, you don't understand who you're dealing with." "I do understand," I said firmly, refusing to show fear. "And that's why I have to finish this. Victor's life, my own safety, and the truth depend on it." Her smirk didn't fade. "Just remember, in this house, knowledge can be more dangerous than action. One wrong step, and it won't just be your reputation at risk." Despite the warnings, I pressed on. Each night, I gathered more evidence, decoding letters, comparing entries in the ledger, and cross-referencing historical records. I realized that the treasure Victor had been after wasn't just wealth, it was proof. Proof of the family's dark past, and perhaps a way to set things right if I could survive long enough to reveal it. By the end of the week, I had mapped out almost the entire vault, identified hidden compartments, and understood the scope of what Victor had discovered. I whispered to myself, "Almost there. Just a little further, Emma, you can do this." But with every discovery, I felt the walls of danger closing in. Margaret's suspicions, Thomas's watchful presence, Sophie's manipulations, they were all reminders that the Hayes family's secrets were guarded fiercely. One mistake could expose me, and I would have no one to protect me. And yet, fear mingled with determination. I knew the only way to survive and prove my innocence was to keep moving forward, following the path Victor had laid, and uncovering the truth that had been buried for generations. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was manipulating the events in the house, pulling strings behind the scenes. Victor's death had triggered chaos, but the more I looked into it, the more it seemed like he hadn't been reckless by accident. Someone wanted him out of the way, and perhaps they wanted me implicated. One evening, I returned to the hidden vault with Claire, hoping to organize what we had already found. As I carefully sifted through old documents, a folded letter slipped out from between two ledgers. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, and sharp. I recognized it immediately, Margaret's. I hesitated, hands trembling as I unfolded it. The letter was dated years before, long before Victor's death, but the contents made my stomach churn. It detailed instructions for covering up certain transactions, redirecting inheritances, and ensuring that the family fortune remained intact at all costs. There were cryptic references to removing threats and managing internal conflicts, words that made me realize that Victor's obsession had likely put him on a dangerous path. "Emma," Claire whispered, her voice shaking, "you found something serious." "I know," I replied, fear mixing with determination. "This isn't just a ledger or a hidden vault. This is proof that someone wanted control at any cost, and Victor was standing in their way." We spent the next few nights cross-referencing the letter with Victor's notes, trying to piece together the connections. A pattern emerged, linking certain family members to suspicious actions, subtle manipulations, and moments that had seemed coincidental before. It became clear that the person orchestrating events had intimate knowledge of the family and the vault's secrets. One afternoon, while pretending to tidy the library, I noticed Thomas lingering near the study, his eyes sharp and calculating. He seemed to watch me without moving, his presence both commanding and unsettling. I realized he had noticed changes in the house, subtle shifts in the family dynamic, and perhaps even suspected my activities. Later in the kitchen, Margaret spoke in a tone that dripped with controlled menace. "Emma, I hope you understand that curiosity can be dangerous. Some doors are meant to stay closed." I met her gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to understand. Someone is dead and secrets are being hidden. I need to know the truth." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "Be careful, Emma. The house has ways of punishing those who pry too deeply." It became painfully clear that the Hayes family's power wasn't just about wealth. It was about control, manipulation, and protecting secrets at any cost. And Victor's death had exposed vulnerabilities that others could exploit. One night, while reviewing old maps from the vault, I noticed a hidden path on the estate grounds, a route that seemed to lead to a small, secluded cabin. It matched references in Victor's journal, where he mentioned an isolated location used to store sensitive documents and valuables. "Claire, look at this," I said, pointing at the map. "This cabin, it's connected to everything Victor was investigating. If we go there, we might find who orchestrated all of this." Claire's eyes widened, concern evident. "It could be dangerous, but if we're going to understand what happened, we have no choice." The next evening, we prepared to investigate the cabin in secret. Flashlights, notebooks, and a sense of cautious anticipation were all we could carry. The estate at night was eerily silent, the shadows long and foreboding. Every step we took felt like walking into a trap, but I knew the risk was worth it. At the cabin, we found more documents, maps, and letters. Among them was correspondence revealing an intricate web of deceit, power struggles, and manipulation within the family. One letter in particular mentioned Victor by name, warning that he was becoming a liability. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to someone we had underestimated, someone whose image of innocence masked a dangerous ambition. "Emma," Claire whispered, trembling, it's not who we thought. The real orchestrator isn't Victor, and it isn't obvious. They've been hiding behind masks all this time." I swallowed hard, realization dawning. The person I had instinctively distrusted the most was not the villain, they were a victim in a much larger game. And the person I had trusted, or overlooked, might have been the one pulling the strings all along. We spent hours piecing together the evidence, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. It became clear that Victor's death was not a random act of anger or obsession. It was a carefully orchestrated move in a decades-long game of power and wealth. I whispered to myself, "I have to be smart, I have to be careful, but I will find the truth and I will prove it." As we left the cabin, clutching the documents, I felt a mix of fear, determination, and clarity. The Hayes family's dark history was coming to light, piece by piece, and I was no longer just a witness. I was a seeker of truth, a fighter in a war of secrets, and the only person who could untangle the web before it destroyed more lives. The documents we carried back from the cabin were heavier than I imagined, not in weight, but in significance. Each letter, each map, each ledger entry was a piece of a puzzle that could expose decades of deceit, betrayal, and crimes long buried. I spread them across my small quarters, studying every line, every signature, every subtle mark. Claire paced beside me. "Emma, you realize how dangerous this is, right? If Margaret or Thomas catch wind of this." "I know," I said, not looking up from the letters. "That's why I have to move carefully, but we can't let their secrets stay hidden forever." One particular set of documents caught my eye, old deeds and letters that referenced a hidden safe beneath the estate's main hall, a vault that supposedly contained valuables and proof of the family's origins. If we could locate it, I realized, we could not only uncover the truth about Victor's death but also validate the journal and ledger I had found. "We have to find it," I whispered. "This is the final piece. The chest, the vault, the ledger, they're all connected." Claire nodded, her face pale but determined. "Then we do it carefully. We can't be seen, and if we are, we run." That night, we waited until the house was quiet. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified, every shadow threatening. We moved toward the main hall, flashlights in hand, following the maps and notes we had pieced together. The safe was concealed beneath an old rug, its lock rusted but intact. As I worked on opening it, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Finding something interesting, Emma?" I froze. Margaret stood at the doorway, her expression unreadable, her arms crossed. "I see curiosity still guides you," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. I tried to stay calm. "I'm just organizing, making sure nothing gets lost." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You've been moving in places you shouldn't, and now you're tampering with what belongs to this family." Claire stepped forward, placing herself slightly between Margaret and me. "She's not harming anything. She's just trying to understand." Margaret's gaze flickered between us. "Understanding comes with responsibility, and you, Emma, are learning that the hard way." I swallowed hard, knowing I had only seconds to act. With a final turn of the key Victor had left behind, the safe creaked open. Inside were stacks of documents, gold coins, and small ledgers detailing the family's transactions and hidden acquisitions for generations. My hands shook as I lifted one of the ledgers, realizing the significance. This proves everything," I whispered. "Victor was right. The fortune, the secrets, the hidden history, it's all here." Margaret's voice softened slightly, though suspicion remained. "Be careful, Emma. Knowledge can be dangerous." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm aware, but someone has to know the truth, and I will make sure it's revealed." With the vault's contents documented and mapped, I began planning the next steps. I had to clear my name, expose the family's secrets, and ensure that Victor's death was not in vain. Every detail had to be precise, every move calculated. Sophie appeared unexpectedly in the hall later. "So, you've found the treasure," she said, smirking. "You have any idea what you're walking into?" "I do," I replied firmly. "I know exactly what this is, and I know what I have to do. I can't let this be hidden anymore. Not for Victor, not for me, and not for the truth." Her smirk didn't falter, but there was a flicker of respect, almost imperceptible. "Then be careful, Emma. In this house, even the walls have eyes." I spent the following nights organizing the documents, cataloging the coins, and planning a way to reveal the truth safely. It wasn't just about the wealth. It was about proving the family's misdeeds, vindicating Victor, and clearing my own name. By the end of the week, I felt a surge of clarity and determination. The Hayes fortune, built on shadows, could finally be exposed. The truth would be known. And I, Emma Hayes, a young housekeeper, would be the one to ensure it happened. I whispered to myself as I looked over the documents one last time, "This is it. Everything Victor fought for, everything he wanted to reveal. I will finish it, and no one, not even the Hayes family, will stop me." The first step was the hardest. I had the documents, the coins, and Victor's notes, but how could I make the truth public without putting myself in immediate danger? I spent hours thinking, cross-checking, and planning, until I realized the safest way was through trusted media contacts, anonymously if necessary, with proof attached. Claire helped me set up a secure system to scan and catalog everything. "Emma, this will reach the public, but be prepared. The family will fight back. Hard," she warned. "I know," I said, my hands steady despite the nervousness in my chest. "But I can't let Victor die in vain, and I can't let their crimes remain hidden." That evening, I left copies of the most critical documents at a journalist's office, carefully packaged to ensure no trace would lead back to me. As I slipped away from the city streets and returned to the mansion, a sense of dread settled over me. I had crossed a line, and I knew the Hayes family would notice immediately. Sure enough, the next morning the tension in the house was palpable. Margaret was livid, pacing the hallway like a predator circling prey. Thomas's gaze was sharper than ever, scrutinizing every move. Sophie's smirk had vanished, replaced by a careful watchfulness. "I know someone has been meddling," Margaret said in a low, dangerous voice when we crossed paths in the kitchen. "And whoever it is will pay." I forced a calm smile. "I'm just doing my duties. You know how careful I am." Her eyes bore into me, unreadable. "Careful isn't enough in this house, Emma. The game has changed." Later that day, whispers started circulating among the staff. Claire stayed close, silent but vigilant. "They'll know soon enough," she said, "and when they do, we need to be ready to act." By evening, the first wave of public reaction hit. Reports surfaced about the Hayes family's historical misdeeds, financial manipulations, and hidden transactions spanning generations. The estate was thrown into chaos. Thomas confronted Margaret in the drawing room. "You should have controlled it," he said, voice low and tense. "This wasn't supposed to leak. Now everything is at risk." Margaret's eyes blazed. "You underestimate me. We still have power. We will contain this." Meanwhile, Sophie found me in the library, her expression neutral but her words sharp. "You did it, Emma. You've stirred the hornet's nest. I hope you know what that means for you." "I know," I replied, heart steady despite the fear. "But I also know it's the only way to be free from their lies." That night, the house was tense beyond anything I had ever felt. Phones rang constantly, lawyers were summoned, and private security began patrolling the grounds. Claire stayed by my side, helping me track movements and making sure we were never alone together. Amidst the chaos, I uncovered more hidden letters in the vault. They hinted at transactions and actions that connected Victor's death to someone trying to eliminate threats to the family fortune. It was clearer than ever. The family's power had been built on secrets, and anyone uncovering them was at risk. "I don't have much time," I whispered to Claire, spreading the letters across the table. "Every move we make now needs to be precise. We can't afford mistakes." She nodded. "I understand, and I'll be with you every step of the way." The next morning, Thomas cornered me near the staircase. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You've started something that can't be undone. You're playing with fire." "I'm aware," I replied, trying to match his calmness. "But the truth needs to be known, and I won't stop." He studied me for a long moment, then walked away without another word. I realized then that he wasn't just a threat. He was cautious, calculating, and waiting for a moment to strike. Every member of the Hayes family was dangerous in their own way. As I returned to the vault that evening, I felt a mixture of fear and resolve. The documents, the ledger, the coins, they weren't just proof. They were my shield and my weapon. And if I could navigate the family's anger, the media scrutiny, and the dangers of the estate, I could finally expose the full truth. I whispered to myself, Victor's death will not be meaningless. The Hayes secrets will be revealed, and I will survive to tell the story. The tension in the house had reached a breaking point. Every glance from Margaret, every calculated silence from Thomas, every fleeting shadow of Sophie made my skin crawl. I knew the family was watching me closely, waiting for a mistake. But I also knew I was closer than ever to uncovering the truth and the hidden treasure that Victor had chased to his death. That night, I returned to the vault with Claire, our flashlights cutting through the shadows. Every crate, every ledge, every corner had been meticulously examined, but one section of the wall remained untouched, a series of old bricks that seemed slightly out of place. "This has to be it," I whispered, tracing the edges with my fingers. The bricks shifted under pressure, revealing a narrow tunnel leading downward. The air was thick and cold, carrying the smell of earth and age. Claire hesitated. "Emma, are you sure about this?" "I have to be," I said firmly. "This is what Victor found. This is why he was obsessed. We're close, Claire. I can feel it." We descended carefully, the beam of the flashlight revealing a small, hidden chamber. Inside, chests filled with coins, documents, and artifacts gleamed faintly in the dim light. I could barely contain my excitement as I realized the significance. This was the treasure Victor had been after, the proof, the wealth, the culmination of decades of secrets. Suddenly, a voice echoed behind us. "I should have known you, end up here." I froze. Margaret stepped into the chamber, her presence commanding, her eyes sharp with fury. Thomas followed silently, his expression unreadable, and Sophie lingered near the entrance, arms crossed, a hint of amusement in her gaze. "Margaret." I started, but she cut me off. "You've gone too far, Emma. This house, this family, you don't understand what you've stumbled into." "I understand perfectly," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Victor's death, the secrets, the manipulation, it ends tonight. I'm not here to steal. I'm here to expose the truth." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You think you can survive this? You're just a girl who cleans our house. What makes you think you can play in our world?" "I'm not just a girl," I said, stepping closer to the chests. "I'm the one who knows everything now, and I won't stop until the truth is out, no matter what you do." Thomas spoke quietly, his voice cold and deliberate. "You've underestimated the stakes, Emma. Knowledge is dangerous here, and now you have too much of it." Sophie tilted her head, a smirk returning. "It's impressive, I'll give you that, but bravery alone won't protect you." I felt the tension tighten, every muscle in my body alert. But I also felt a surge of determination. I opened the first chest carefully, spreading out the coins, documents, and artifacts. The evidence was undeniable, proof of manipulation, wealth built on deception, and Victor's meticulous research connecting it all. Margaret stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. "You don't know the half of it, Emma, but if you go public with this, you'll regret it." I met her gaze steadily. "I've weighed the risk, I know the danger, but the truth has to come out. Victor died trying to reveal it. I can't let that be in vain." Thomas advanced slowly, a shadow of authority behind every step. "Then you leave us no choice. We protect our family at all costs." Before the confrontation escalated further, I held up a document, a ledger Victor had highlighted. "This proves everything, Thomas. Every secret, every manipulation, every illegal acquisition. It's all here. You can try to stop me, but once the world sees this, there's no going back." Margaret's hand trembled slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Even Thomas paused, considering the weight of the proof in my hands. Sophie, however, looked genuinely intrigued, as if finally seeing the outcome she hadn't expected. I realized then that I held the balance of power. Not through force, not through threat, but through knowledge, the one thing the Hayes family feared the most. "We're not your enemies, Emma," Claire whispered behind me. "We just want the truth revealed safely." I nodded, feeling the culmination of weeks of investigation, fear, and courage. "Then let's do this carefully. But it ends tonight. No more secrets, no more lies." As we prepared to remove the evidence and ensure it reached the public, I felt a strange calmness amidst the chaos. The Hayes family's power was formidable, but knowledge, truth, and courage could stand against it. And I was ready to take that stand. The morning after our discovery, I knew there was no turning back. The documents, the coins, and the ledgers were all ready to be delivered to the press, and once the truth went public, the Hayes family could no longer manipulate events behind closed doors. Claire stayed close, nervous but resolute. "Emma, are you sure you want to do this? Once it's out, there's no undoing it." "I have to," I said firmly. "Victor didn't die for nothing, and I can't let their lies survive another day." We worked quickly, scanning the documents, organizing the evidence, and sending anonymous digital copies to trustworthy journalists. Every step was tense, each keystroke filled with the knowledge that someone in the house might be watching. By the afternoon, the first headlines hit. The Hayes family, long considered untouchable, were suddenly under public scrutiny. Reports detailed decades of hidden transactions, manipulations, and unethical practices, with evidence that traced back generations. The reaction inside the mansion was immediate and explosive. Margaret stormed into the main hall, her face pale with fury. "Who did this? Who dared to expose us?" Thomas's voice was low, controlled but dangerous. "We will find them, and when we do, they will regret it." Sophie appeared quietly, leaning against the doorway. "It seems someone been very clever indeed, Emma." I stood my ground, heart racing but voice steady. "It's not about cleverness, it's about the truth. And it's finally coming out." Margaret slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "This house, this family, it's mine to control. You can't just destroy it. Control built on lies isn't control at all," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "The truth can't be hidden anymore, and I won't let anyone be hurt again because of secrets." Over the next hours, the house descended into chaos. Phone calls, lawyers, and private security swarmed the estate. Thomas tried to assert authority, but even he seemed rattled by the scope of the leak. Margaret's usual poise cracked under the pressure, her calm demeanor replaced by fear and anger. Sophie, surprisingly, offered a measured voice. "You've shaken the foundation, Emma, but don't underestimate them, they'll fight back." "I'm ready," I said, looking around at the family's reaction. "I've been afraid, yes, but not anymore. I've seen their secrets, and now everyone else will too." As the day turned to evening, I realized something important. This wasn't just about exposing the family's misdeeds. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own dignity, and the memory of Victor. The documents proved not only the family's corruption, but also my innocence, and I intended to use them wisely. Claire placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Emma. You faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and you came out standing." I nodded, feeling the weight of weeks of investigation lift slightly. "We did it, Claire. Victor would be proud. And maybe the Hayes family will finally learn that power built on lies always collapses." By nightfall, news outlets had picked up the story and public scrutiny intensified. The family could no longer hide behind wealth or reputation. Every secret, every manipulation, every crime was now visible to the world. I realized then that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be dangerous, but the truth had been set in motion. And for the first time since Victor's death, I felt a sense of justice, a sense that courage and persistence could truly make a difference. I whispered to myself, "We've started something that can't be undone, and I will make sure it leads to justice, not more harm." The house felt like a trap. Every hallway, every door, every shadow seemed alive, watching me. Margaret, Thomas, and even Sophie were all moving with purpose, each carrying their own agenda. The leak had forced their hand, and now the real danger was about to unfold. I stayed in my quarters, organizing the last documents and making sure copies of everything were hidden securely. Claire was with me, her presence a silent reassurance. "Emma, whatever happens, we stay calm. We've come this far, we can't let them scare us now." I nodded, tension tightening my chest. "I know, but this is it, Claire. They're going to confront us directly. The treasure, the evidence, everything, they won't let it go quietly." As predicted, the confrontation came that evening. Margaret entered, her face pale but controlled, eyes blazing. "Emma, I warned you, you've crossed the line. Now you'll see what happens when you defy this family." Thomas followed silently, his voice low, measured. "It's time to finish this, Emma. You've stirred a hornet's nest, and now you must pay." Sophie lingered near the doorway, watching intently. "I have to admit, you've impressed me. But the game's not over, not yet." I stood my ground, heart racing but voice steady. "I've done nothing wrong, I'm exposing the truth. You can threaten me, intimidate me, but it won't stop what's coming. The world will know everything." Margaret's hands trembled slightly, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her. "You think you're untouchable, but knowledge without caution is dangerous." I ignored the threat and turned my attention back to the vault, to the treasure we had discovered. The chest, the coins, the ledgers, they were all within reach. I whispered to Claire, "We can do this now. The treasure, the proof, it's all here. We have to act before they escalate further." We carefully moved through the secret chamber, documenting and organizing everything. The glow of the coins, the weight of the ledgers, and the meticulous order of Victor's notes made me realize the true scope of what the family had hidden for generations. Suddenly, Margaret stepped closer, her eyes scanning the documents with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "So this is what you've been chasing," she said softly, almost in awe. "All these years, you've uncovered it." Thomas's expression darkened. "It's more than she should have, too much power in the wrong hands." Sophie smirked faintly. "Looks like the tables have turned, don't they?" I met each of their gazes steadily. "This isn't about power, it's about truth. Victor's death, the lies, the manipulation, they end tonight." "I won't let fear stop me." Margaret's voice was sharp. "You think you can survive this? The family will protect itself, Emma. You're in our world now, and there's no escape without consequences." I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline surge. I don't need escape, I need justice, and I have everything I need to make sure it happens. For hours, we faced each other in tense silence. Every word, every movement was measured. Finally, Margaret's shoulders slumped slightly, Thomas's jaw tightened, and Sophie's amusement faded. The weight of the evidence and the certainty in my voice had shifted the balance. I realized then that the treasure, the documents, and the coins were more than just proof. They were leverage. And with leverage, courage, and truth, I could confront even the most powerful and dangerous family. As I prepared to remove the treasure and secure it for the public, I whispered to Claire, "This is it. The final step. We're exposing the whole truth tonight, and no one can stop us now." The chamber was silent except for our measured breaths and the faint clink of coins. Danger was real, imminent, but for the first time, I felt a sense of control. The Hayes family's empire of secrets was about to be dismantled, and I would survive to see the truth revealed. By dawn, everything was ready. The documents, the ledgers, and the treasure itself had been carefully packaged and sent to trusted journalists and legal authorities. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what I was about to set in motion. Claire looked at me, eyes wide with concern. "Emma, once this goes public, there's no turning back. Are you ready for the storm?" "I have to be," I said, taking a deep breath. Victor's work, all the secrets, the truth, they're finally going to be seen. And it's up to me to see it through. News outlets broke the story in the morning. The headlines were explosive, detailing decades of manipulation, unethical practices, and hidden wealth within the Hayes family. The documents and ledgers provided undeniable proof, the treasure acting as a symbol of their long-hidden empire. The reaction inside the mansion was immediate and chaotic. Margaret paced, hands trembling as she tried to make sense of the exposure. Thomas's face was stoic, but I could see the tension behind his eyes. Sophie moved quietly, watching the unraveling with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. "You've destroyed everything," Margaret said finally, her voice breaking with rage and disbelief. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I understand perfectly," I replied firmly. "I've exposed the truth. The world now knows what has been hidden for generations. This isn't destruction, it's accountability." Thomas stepped closer, his voice measured. "You've made powerful enemies, Emma. The family will not forgive this." "I'm not seeking forgiveness," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm seeking justice, and this time the truth has the upper hand." Sophie's expression softened slightly, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "You've played the long game, Emma, and you've won." The following days were tense. The Hayes family scrambled to respond, their reputation crumbling under public scrutiny. Legal investigations began, financial audits were demanded, and the mansion was filled with lawyers and journalists. But I remained calm, knowing I had prepared carefully and ensured that the evidence could not be dismissed or destroyed. Claire stayed close, whispering encouragement. You did it, Emma. You faced fear, danger, and power, and you came out standing. Victor would be proud. I nodded, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift slightly. We did it, Claire. The truth is finally out. And no matter what happens next, we've proven that courage and persistence can prevail. Margaret confronted me one last time. You think you've won? The family's name, our legacy, it's not over yet. I met her gaze calmly. The family's name was built on lies and manipulation. What I've done isn't about revenge, it's about accountability, justice, and truth, and that's something no one can take away. As I walked through the mansion one final time, I felt a sense of closure and liberation. The Hayes family's secrets were exposed, the treasure recovered, and Victor's mission fulfilled. The danger hadn't disappeared, but the balance of power had shifted. Truth had triumphed over deception, and I had survived. I whispered to myself, this is the beginning of something new. The past may be dark, but the future is ours to shape. Courage, truth, and persistence, they always prevail in the end. The aftermath of the revelations hit the Hayes family harder than I had anticipated. Margaret retreated into silence, her power stripped, her calculated authority dismantled by the evidence I had released. Thomas was forced to cooperate with investigators, his stoic demeanor masking the frustration and fear that I could see in his eyes. Sophie, surprisingly, left the mansion quietly, perhaps realizing that some games are not worth playing when the truth is finally unmasked. Claire and I moved carefully through the mansion, documenting everything for the authorities, ensuring that nothing could be hidden or destroyed. Emma, it feels like the end of an era, Claire said softly, her voice tinged with both relief and sorrow. It is, I replied, glancing around at the once intimidating halls that now felt hollow. But endings are also beginnings. The truth has freed us from lies and from the fear that held this house captive for generations. I spent time reviewing the treasure and the ledgers once more. Every coin, document, and artifact told a story, not just of greed and manipulation, but also of resilience, courage, and the consequences of hiding from the truth. The final letters revealed shocking details. The Hayes fortune had been built on a criminal act centuries ago, and generations had maintained that legacy through deception and intimidation. Claire looked up at me. Do you think they'll ever recover from this? They may try, I said thoughtfully, but power without integrity is fragile. The moment the truth is known, control slips, and they've lost that control forever. Despite the chaos outside, there was a sense of relief. The staff who had feared being implicated or punished began to speak openly, sharing their experiences and confirming parts of the evidence. Margaret, once untouchable, now faced scrutiny she could not evade. That evening, I walked through the estate alone, reflecting on the journey. Fear, uncertainty, and danger had been my constant companions, but so had determination, clarity, and the desire to see justice done. I whispered to myself, Victor, we did it. Your truth is safe, and the world knows what was hidden. It may have taken courage, and it may have been dangerous, but it was worth every risk. As the sun set over the estate, casting golden light across the grounds, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The Hayes family's secrets were no longer a threat, the treasure had been recovered, and the truth was undeniable. The estate that had once symbolized fear and control now stood as a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of uncovering hidden truths. I turned to Claire with a smile. We've survived, we've uncovered the truth, and we've changed the course of this family's history. That's something to be proud of. Claire nodded, her eyes glistening. You were brave, Emma. You faced danger, deception, and power, and you came out stronger. Victor would be proud. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the journey lift and a sense of hope settle in. This is only the beginning, Claire. The past is revealed, the present is safe, and the future, well, we get to shape it with honesty, courage, and integrity. The Hayes estate was quiet, but the impact of the truth would resonate far beyond its walls. Secrets had been exposed, justice served, and a new chapter begun, not just for me, but for everyone affected by decades of deception. I whispered once more, softly, with conviction, courage and truth may be frightening, but they are stronger than fear, lies, and power. And I will carry that lesson with me always. The final days at the Hayes estate felt surreal. The mansion that once felt like a prison of shadows and secrets now seemed almost peaceful, the tension replaced with a fragile calm. Margaret and Thomas were facing legal consequences, Sophie had distanced herself from the chaos, and the staff finally felt free to speak their truths without fear. Claire and I worked to ensure that every piece of evidence, every ledger, every document, and even the treasure itself was properly documented and handed over to the authorities. The coins, letters, and artifacts were not just symbols of wealth, they were proof, justice, and a legacy corrected. Standing in the grand hall, I reflected on how far I had come. I, a young housekeeper, had walked through shadows, faced danger, and uncovered centuries of secrets. The weight of fear and uncertainty had been immense, but the clarity and courage that guided me had been stronger. Claire spoke softly beside me. "Emma, what will you do now? After everything, what's next?" I smiled, a calm determination in my eyes. "We rebuild, not just the estate, but the truth. The treasure and the evidence can be used to restore what's right, to support those who were harmed, and to set things straight. And I'll make sure the lessons are remembered." Later, as the sun set over the Hamptons, casting long golden rays across the mansion, I looked out over the estate and whispered to myself, "Victor, we did it. The truth is safe. The lies have been exposed, and we've shown that courage, persistence, and honesty can overcome even the most powerful deceptions." The treasure and the documents were used to compensate the staff who had been silenced, support investigations that would right past wrongs, and establish scholarships and foundations to honor those who had suffered under hidden abuses. Every coin and every document had a purpose beyond wealth. They were a tool to restore dignity and justice. Margaret and Thomas, once untouchable, were reduced to confronting the consequences of their actions. Sophie quietly acknowledged the change, realizing that manipulation and control could no longer dominate, and I finally felt free, no longer a silent witness but an active force for truth. I walked through the empty halls one last time, my steps echoing softly. "This place was filled with fear, lies, and shadows," I said aloud, "but it's also a place of lessons learned, courage proven, and truth revealed." Claire stood beside me, smiling. "You've changed everything, Emma. And you've shown that even one person can make a difference." I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. It's not just about changing things, it's about inspiring others to stand for truth, even when the odds are against them. Courage and honesty matter, persistence matters, and above all, justice matters. As I looked out over the Hamptons coastline, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, I felt a quiet triumph. The Hayes family's empire of secrets had crumbled, Victor's mission had been fulfilled, and I had survived with my integrity intact. I whispered softly, letting the words carry on the wind, "No matter how dark the past, no matter how dangerous the path, courage and truth will always light the way. And if we are brave enough to follow them, we can overcome anything." With that, I walked into the future with confidence, carrying the lessons, the victories, and the knowledge that one person's determination could change everything. The Hayes estate was no longer a place of fear. It was a monument to courage, resilience, and the power of truth.